The RTX 4080 full reviews should be going up on November 15th and the card going on sale on November 16th. However, that means these are out in reviewers' hands and scores and information are starting to leak. We've already reported on some 3D Mark results that leaked early, but now we're seeing a Video Cards article here reporting on a number of additional synthetic leaks, but also some actual gaming performance numbers, which is always nice to see. We've got a whole bunch of other information coming up as well, as like, what about that 4080 12GB that got canceled? What's happening with that? Release dates, all sorts of information today. Let's stay tuned, but first let's jump in and take a look at this. So it's looking like Video Cards are saying we have obtained. So for the source here, we've just got to say videocards.com seems to have sources who have given them this information. And this is the 3D Mark results, but now that we have scores at stock, as well as shifting the power limit slider to the max, and then an actual OC. Now, if you're not really doing much overclocking, generally you can just tell your GPU it can have more power by adjusting a power slider percentage, but then you can also actually tell it to clock faster. And both of those things can increase performance, but in a slightly different way, and sometimes you combine them together. Anyway, the point is that's what we're seeing here. And actually, according to these results, I'm kind of excited because a lot of GPUs nowadays get like very little performance gain from an overclock. Sometimes they're kind of just pushed to the red line right out of the box. And I'm not saying that these are some massive gains, but it is looking like they're seeing a 9% gain, well, up to 9% in 3D Mark Times by Extreme and up to 7% with 3D Mark Port Royal. And they had the courtesy to, get out of the way, to give us some percentages against some other graphics cards. And as usual, I need to say that when people look at these scores from these other cards, people are like, well, my 3090 gets more than 10,293. Okay, I'm pretty sure these are aggregate average results that are typical for these GPUs from 3D Mark's database. I'm fairly certain that's where Video Cards is getting these numbers from. So again, your individual results, especially if you overclock, may vary. Anyway, so we're seeing the 4090 reporting as the baseline here when you look at these percentage numbers. So all these percentages are what percent of the performance of an RTX 4090 these other GPUs are getting. So the 4080 without the overclock is looking like 71% of the performance of the RTX 4090 at the Extreme 4K preset, so Times by Extreme. Now, I will point out that that's a much bigger gap between the 80 and 90 series than we saw with the 3000 series of GPUs. So with the 3000 series, a lot of people were like, well, the 3090 costs $1,500 and the 3080 costs, $700. Those were, theoretical MSRPs, as we all saw. But the point was, the 3080 got within, what, 10 or 15% of the performance of that 3090. There was not a massive gap in performance between that top tier where you paid a ridiculous premium and then the 80 class, which was at least supposedly supposed to be much more reasonably priced, although we saw the whole GPU apocalypse. Anyway, so I am warning you guys that there's a bigger gap here than, than the previous generation, and they might be kind of counting on that for the name branding to make you think you're getting more than what you are relative to the top-end chip. Anyway, with the power limit, looks like we went up to 73% of the performance and then up to 78% with the OC plus power limit, which is really nice to see. Now, if you're looking at this compared to the previous generation with the 3090 Ti, 3090, and where I think might be a reasonable comparison, which is the 3080s that we've got over here, because you can buy these right now for a little over $700, and the 4080 is going to be launching at a $1,200 MSRP, and many board partners I've already reported will charge a lot more. That's a big jump, guys. So just be aware that NVIDIA is pricing these things high and is setting their relative performance to the 90 class a lot lower than the previous generation. So just something to keep in mind. We're also seeing Port Royal results and Speedway results. So in the Port Royal scores, it's looking like we're seeing the 4080 at 69 nice percent of the 4090, although I'm going to say I'm not sure if there's something wrong with Video Card's chart right now, because it looks like now they're setting the 4090 as 98%. So I don't know if they had a 4090 OC score that they set as 100% and then just didn't show it, or if there's something wrong with these calculations, but we can still see the scores and the numbers. But I did notice that in the video cards chart that we're looking off of here. But anyway, I'm glad that they put this here and saved me some time of, trying to get my own charts and all that. Anyway, 4080 OC is at 75% of that top performance. So there you go. And we can see how that scales versus the other cards in the lineup. It's certainly looking like NVIDIA is positioning these in both price and performance to kind of scale up along on top of the 3000 series in performance, but price as well, which is what's kind of disappointing. Now, we're also seeing some gaming benchmarks leak. And now these are not videocards.com saying that they have obtained these scores. This is videocards.com saying that they found these on the Chip Hell forums, okay? And it looks like these were from known hardware leaker Megasize GPU and BFK9K. Now, this is interesting because it is gaming benchmarks, but we're going to see them compared against an RTX 4090 from another Chip Hell member. However, the RTX 4090 is using a 12900KF CPU. And I believe the 4080 leaks are on a different system from a different user, and they're on a Ryzen 7 7600X CPU. Now, both of these are very fast gaming CPUs, and there's not a massive difference of performance in most games. And when you're GPU limited, there won't be any real difference between the two CPUs. But as I saw in my RTX 4090 review, it's very easy to become CPU limited, especially at lower resolutions, but even at 4K, although these are 4K results that will help reduce some of what we're seeing here, like some of the CPU limits that we might see. But anyway, here we're seeing the 4K extreme results from Forza Horizon 5. Now, I'm sure this was before they had their brand new ray tracing update and all of that. But we do see it reporting as the 4080 here on the 7600X, so that's more confirmation of the test system that was involved. Here we're seeing some more benchmarks here. Is this the new Call of Duty benchmark? I think this is the new Call of Duty benchmark. Once again, we're seeing the 4K results here. And let's see, does this have the image scaling enabled? It's hard to read these results. I don't know, guys. So we got to make sure here. Now, this one, I'm not too sure what we're seeing. This is definitely Shadow of the Tomb Raider. We can see some average results here. Again, 4K looks like highest preset. You can see the graphics settings involved. And here we are seeing Cyberpunk benchmark. Although one thing I'm noticing here that's a little bit annoying is they've clearly just used the Ray Tracing Ultra preset, but that enables DLSS quality to the auto setting, which means it's now automatically choosing the DLSS setting to use, and it is using DLSS. This is not the native performance. So another thing to keep in mind when you're looking at those numbers. However, apparently when you compile this up against, this is again the 4090 versus the 4080, but again, different CPU and test platforms, we're seeing a 15.7% increase in performance in Forza Horizon 5. Although I can tell you right now that on my 5950X, which is again a different and weaker for gaming CPU, I was definitely CPU limited in Forza Horizon 5, even at 4K. So we could be seeing the top end on the 4090 being reduced due to CPU limitations there. The Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we're seeing more like a 38.8% performance lead for that 4090. Red Dead Redemption 2, we're seeing a 30, oh, sorry, these are, is that a frame rate? Okay, this one didn't put percentage on there, but anyway, plus 30. But okay, it's basically a percentage anyway because the baseline's 100, well, almost 100. Anyway, so yeah, about 30.3%. And then we're seeing Cyberpunk 2077, 33.7%. Again, remember these frame rate numbers, that definitely had DLSS enabled, so that's not native performance. And we have Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 at a 37% lead here. So interesting stuff. We do have some more information here as well, which is that the PCB itself is also being pictured up close. Now, again, the embargo on this type of unboxing and showing off all of this is still supposed to be the 15th. So some people are, leaking it early. This is from the known leaker Kitty Yuko. who has leaked stuff in the past. And there we go. There's your close-up PCB and die shot of the RTX 4080, 16 gigabyte. Do we still have to call it the 16 gigabyte now that there's not a 12 gigabyte model? I guess we can just call it the 4080 now. I don't want to, it will still have the power connector, so keep your eye on that. I'll come back to that in a second. What I meant to do was talk more about some 4080 related stuff before I jump into power connectors. So the colorful iGame Advanced cooler design is now, you know, out there for us to take a look at. It looks like it's going to go up to 400 watts of power. And there's the design. You can see the 4080 and I think they have a 4090 version available as well. Anyway, there you go. This should be available on the 16th, and it does not look like the pricing is available yet. And then we are also seeing Gigabyte showing off their 4080s and a variety of designs. As usual, we have our Aorus Extreme Water Force series. So these are your AIO water cooling with a radiator versions. Then we've got the Aorus Wind Force. Is it Aorus or Aorus? Whatever. Anyway, Wind Force series. And then we have their just Gigabyte, you know, gaming whatever series. I have the Gigabyte Gaming OC version of the 4090, and honestly, I like it quite a bit, and I like their stability, like, mounting bracket solution that actually screws into the case a lot better than what some of the other companies offered there. So I know sometimes I give Gigabyte a hard time, but I actually do like what I'm getting from my 4090 from them. Anyway, but again, these will be featuring the famous 12VH power cables. Now, apparently there's some more updates on this topic. I know this is everybody's favorite topic, okay? But if you were out of the loop somehow on all of this, people have been seeing their cables on their 4090s right at the connector kind of melting. That's concerning. What's going on here? Well, everybody seems to be investigating the problem, but nobody seems to have an actual definite answer. And it still seems to be radio silence from NVIDIA regarding any official statement on the problem. Maybe they can't figure out exactly what the issue is either. Well, we are seeing PCI-SIG, who's the organization behind, you know, the actual, you know, standards regarding these types of things, right? Making some sort of revision updates that seems to be changing part of the connector design, but it seems to just be the sensor pins being easier and better to connect. So this maybe is designed to help the connection issues, but it's not where the power is actually going through. So I'm not sure if this is designed as a reaction to what's going on here or not, or if this would help the problem if you're not actually making the power pins connect better. So that's interesting. Now, John Guru, who is the Corsair PSU expert, has also been weighing in on the topic, and while I believe he also was not able to replicate the issue, it seems like all the experts trying to get in here and actually replicate the problem aren't being able to do it. He is commenting that on some of the ones that reported issues, it looks like the power connector might not be fully inserted correctly. Whereas, you know, some that are inserted correctly seem to have no gap. Some of these photos seem to have a bit of a gap. So he was claiming that perhaps it's user error on the connection, although that could also be a design error if your design makes it difficult for a user to insert correctly. However, I believe that other people have chimed in and said that their connector just simply can't fully connect. And maybe that just isn't possible on all designs, or maybe there's some issues with that. I don't know, but it seems like this issue is not fully resolved, but this is another potential issue, is just if it's not seated correctly, then they're not connecting up correctly, it builds up resistance and heat, all of that. I don't know, guys. It's a difficult question to answer, apparently. A lot of people have theories, nobody seems to be 100% sure. Although Intel is adopting this connector for its data center GPU, the Max 1100 PCIe series. So anyway, they're moving ahead with using it, at least on that one. Also, Intel is launching their NUC 13 Extreme Raptor Canyon with up to a Core i9-13900K CPU, and this will cost $1179 up to $1549 US. So if you're interested in that, you could go ahead and take a look. Again, all my sources will be linked in the description. Now, on the topic of buying GPUs, how about let's get some AMD info in here. So AMD's 6000 series GPUs have already been pricing extremely competitively up against their NVIDIA competitors, both in performance, if you want to look at it that way, similar performance except for ray tracing at much less price, or if you just compare GPUs at the same price, you now usually get a lot more rasterized performance from AMD. They've been priced really well. You could take a look at my recent, GPU recommendation video. Where am I going to be out of the way here? Maybe here. But AMD is going to be adding even more to the value proposition, at least if you're interested in either the Callisto protocol or Dead Island 2 or both, because we're seeing a new bundle. And it looks like every GPU from the 6000 series, except for the 6400 and 6500 XT, will be getting both games, and even the 6400 and 6500 XT will be getting Dead Island 2. So if you're looking to buy a new GPU and you are interested in the 6000 series already due to its, aggressive pricing, then, well, get a couple games thrown into the mix might help you out as well. And again, this link will be in the description. You can go ahead and find participating retailers to make sure you're buying it from somewhere that will support this deal and all of that. The Callisto protocol certainly looks interesting to me. Isn't that the remake of the that one? I'm spacing the name, and we're live here with no editing, so let's just move on. That one looks interesting to me. Now, the EVGA GeForce RTX 4090 for the Win 3, which will never be sold because EVGA got out of the business, has been being demonstrated by places like Jay's 2 Cents. I believe, didn't Gamers Nexus get their hands on one as well, if I'm remembering correctly? So anyway, kind of interesting to see what could have been, but is not going to be. Don't want to dwell on that, though. Now, yeah. Next thing I wanted to talk about is how about the 4080 12GB, which got unlaunched? Well, everybody kind of assumed it would get relaunched as a 4070 Ti. And the usual suspects in the GPU leaking game seem to be confirming this, with Copite7Kimmy saying the original RTX 4080 12GB will become the RTX 4070 Ti instead. And then Mega-Size GPU, who also has been leaking quite a bit of stuff, is saying it will be available on January 5th. So we're actually getting a release date. Again, this is not official from NVIDIA. This is the usual suspects in the leaking game who do get a lot of things correct, and appears to even have a photo of some of the box design. This is kind of what this looks like, or some of that. So anyway, it's looking like it'll be January 5th before we get the 4070 Ti. And that could mean that it's going to be, well, in other words, we're getting the 4080 16GB in November on the 16th. Does this mean we're getting nothing in December and then we'll get an early January launch with the 4070 Ti as our next card? It kind of looks that way because we don't have any information about anything else coming in. And I think what's going on here is NVIDIA wants to keep prices high on their 3000 series and keep selling those. So they're going to be reluctant to offer something that's directly competitive with their performance. And even if they do, it'll be on a, what's the value, what's the performance value there, performance per dollar? Because NVIDIA seems to be wanting to price things kind of in line performance per dollar with the previous generation. Now, speaking of this 4070 Ti, assuming it does launch and is not cut down, we do still have slides given to us by NVIDIA from back when it was going to launch as the 4080 12GB. And while this is trying to show off its DLSS 3 frame generation numbers versus the DLSS 2 results from the 3000 series, keep in mind that DLSS 3 frame generation is a cool feature, guys. Don't get me wrong, it's a cool feature, but it's not an apples-to-apples comparison with DLSS 2. It increases the motion fluidity of the game. It looks smoother in motion, but unlike normal frames or even DLSS 2 frames, which both increase the smoothness and increase the responsiveness of the game because the actual game engine is rendering frames quicker. DLSS 3 doesn't improve the responsiveness of the game. So it's not an apples to apples comparison here, although it is a new cool feature that the 4000 series does have. I am positive about the feature overall. I think it's cool. But if you look at the gray bars here, you see the DLSS off performance, and that's where we see the 4080 12GB here actually in Plague Tale Requiem in NVIDIA's own marketing slide. And again, this would be renamed as the 4070 Ti if the rumors are true, and this would sound reasonable. This is actually losing to the 3090 Ti in this test, and very small lead over the original 3080. Now, in some of the other tests, it does a little bit better. Here in F122 with ray tracing on, it's more competitive with the 3090 Ti, but it's still losing to it. And it does have a healthier lead over the 3080 from the previous generation. And then we did have Microsoft Flight Simulator results where we see the 4080 basically tying, but still slightly losing to the 3090 Ti. And then, again, a bit of a healthier lead over the previous gen's 3080. So in other words, what should we expect from this 4070 Ti if it really is just the unlaunched 4080 12GB? Well, it looks like in January, you might be able to get a GPU that is competitive with the 3090 Ti, although it looks like overall will be worse. It has half the VRAM and seems to lose in performance. We'll have the added feature of DLSS 3, which will be nice to see. But what really matters is what sort of price it comes in at. Because remember, the original 4080 12GB, which is now our 4070 Ti, was going to launch at $900. And NVIDIA is backing off saying it was poorly named. They haven't officially said it was poorly priced. So if it still comes in at $900, I don't know, guys. If it's not that much better than a 3080, you can currently get 3080s for like $730 last time I checked a couple of days ago. So something to think about. Now, in another note, the RTX 2060, unlike the rest of the 2000 series, has actually still been in production and being sold new and in the supply chain by NVIDIA. This was done to give another option for people looking for a GPU during the GPU mining apocalypse. And that production has continued up until now. But while this is not official news from NVIDIA, according to this WCCF Tech article, they are saying that this is, the 2060 production will now actually be ending. Now, the 2060 got very popular. It's second place in the Steam hardware survey, losing to the 1060, followed by the 1650 and then the 3060. So interesting stuff, but it's looking like WCCF Tech is claiming sources in the Asia-Pacific channel, Channelgate, are suggesting that NVIDIA has stopped supplying its vendors with GeForce RTX 2060 and RTX 2060 super chips. And the company has also asked its partners to limit the supply of their cards by the end of the month. So, in other words, it looks like NVIDIA is trying to phase out the 2060, tighten up the supply on that. Now, one thing is, in a lot of my GPU recommendation videos, I recommended the 2060 over the 3050 because it cost less and performed better. It does have worse power consumption and 2 GB less VRAM. But this has been an interesting price to performance option for somebody looking for an NVIDIA GPU, but looking at the 3000 series being incredibly overpriced. So I'm kind of sorry to see this go, but hopefully that means that NVIDIA is preparing their next gen of mid-range GPUs, and you know, they do need to sell out their previous gen stuff and get that out of the market before they launch something that's in any way pricing competitive. So we'll see what happens here. But I'm actually kind of sorry to see that one go at the moment, since the 3050s are still so expensive. Anyway, the Ryzen 7 7700 and 7600 non-X CPUs, which would come in at 65 watts, have been spotted at the SIS software, I don't know, guys, I can't pronounce things. Anyway, the point is, these look to be power-efficient designs. So we saw, because AMD and Intel are so competitive in the CPU market right now, they've been pushing their CPUs to ridiculous power inefficiency levels to try to take the top performance crown in benchmarks. But redlining the CPUs out of the box isn't necessarily actually the best idea for a typical user and use case. It just looks good in benchmarks. So if these came in with more reasonable power consumption, that would be interesting. The other thing that would be interesting would be if they came in at a lower price, because AMD's CPUs or their motherboards, or maybe both, hopefully both, need to get a bit cheaper, I think, to be more competitively interesting up against the Intel competition, where the motherboards and such can be had for a bit cheaper. Last thing I'll end with here is it's looking like there's reports of a 3070 Ti laptop GPU being sold as desktop cards. And the main thing I'll say is, I think this is mostly in like Chinese markets and things like that, but if you do see these, I do not recommend buying one, because my understanding is that official NVIDIA drivers do not support this, so you're gonna have to rely on some weird hacked drivers from the sellers, and I would not trust that. Nor would I be happy about a GPU that will probably never get official drivers updates ever. Now, the attractive option here seems to be the pricing. And it's an interesting GPU, but I wouldn't recommend buying it. It looks like it's basically the laptop 3070 Ti pushed up to a 220 watt TDP, which is 70 watts lower than the desktop reference spec. But again, I don't recommend trying to grab one of these. I hope all of you have an excellent day.